issues that are the most pressing for me and the most personal for me are things like uh, uh, gender affirming care and documents that accurately reflect my gender. Hey, y'all. Hey, it's me, Peppermint. Welcome back to Queer 101, the podcast where we talk about any and everything under the sun, including queer art, queer culture, and queer literature. Hey, Hugh, how you doing?
I am good. I don't know. We're coming at you, listeners, from the middle of a literal and spiritual justice-based blizzard. So I'm not even exactly sure how I'm doing at the moment. I'm feeling covered in stuff. How about you?
At least covered in snow. I feel pretty good. Yeah, same, I guess. It is nice to live on. One of the things I enjoy about living in New York and on the East Coast is being able to eventually, hopefully, sometimes see seasons change, and so I do enjoy the snow. I know a lot of people who probably don't live on the East Coast may assume that we get winter every single year, like snowfall every year during winter, but we don't.
Not
And so
anymore.
it's pretty rare. And so now that it's here, and there's a lot more people than New Yorkers are experiencing this for sure. So I'm enjoying the blizzard. I hope everyone stays safe. I hope that people who, are out in the cold are able to get to warming centers and all those things. But in terms of that, there's really almost nothing like the wonder of nature. When you wake up the morning of the snowstorm and you can
The first
see,
48
it's
hours of a
beautiful.
snowstorm
Yeah,
are
it's
incredible. The way it like
beautiful.
quiets everything and covers
Oh, it's so
everything.
quiet.
I always think
So
like
quiet.
the inside of every blizzard feels like the same time period because everything is covered. You can't see anything. You don't know exactly when or where you are. The light is weird and magical.
That's
And
the
then
best time. If they're
tomorrow,
going to transfer us back to like 1820, well, maybe not that year.
uh, uh,
Uh, it could happen and we wouldn't know for a while.
yeah, yeah. And I think they're trying. I mean, that's the other blizzard we are inside, getting ready for tomorrow's State of the Shitty Union address. They are
It's
trying to
true.
transport us backwards, it feels like, or so far forwards, we are under complete control of our tech overlords. I enjoy that blizzard much less than this blizzard. Let's just say that.
Yeah, yeah. Is that a blizzard? It's like yeah.
Fire
What
tornado?
other
I don't
kind?
know.
Yeah, some kind of shark. It's like a sharknado, fire blizzard, NATO, Jordo,
It's like every
Torino.
disaster movie just sort of layered on top of one
Yeah.
another all at once.
It's the Langoliers.
The
You probably don't remember
Langoliers.
that movie.
That's the one with they're outside the window of the plane, aren't they, at some point? Is that one?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about it. Deep cut. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't even know how this State of the Union is gonna. I mean, I'm sure that this State of the Union will be pretty much like any other State of the Union that this president has done, rambling and incoherent and really negative,
To the
and
haters and
attacking.
losers.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then the
Uh,
Times will report it as like President Trump gave an important speech today about global issues.
Always. Yeah. And the Democrats will be like his State of the Union will be like, and we have to get rid of all the Democrats. And the Democrats will be like, we want to work with Republicans. Like, it's like,
We
what
see
on
some
earth?
points we can agree with him
Yeah, we
on.
see some points we can agree with.
We also want
And then
to get rid of the
yeah,
progressives.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. We also hate the left. It's wild. Yeah, yeah. And I am
I found
grateful. I'm looking forward to Representative Summer Lee's uh sort of alternative response to the
nice.
State of the Union. It's not even though she is with the Democrat Party, she is not the official sort of spokesperson for the Democrats. Of course, the
Yeah, she's
Democratic
doing it from
Party.
the Working Families Party, right?
Yeah. And so the Democratic Party, the opposing party always has a response to whatever the whoever delivers the State of Union, whichever side does. And so she's with Working Families Party, which is basically an offshoot of the Democrats. But it is I guess it's probably the second largest offshoot of the Democrats nationally in the country. But yeah, I'm excited for her response because she is a real one, and it'll be great to hear like an appropriate response to something as opposed to, we already know what the Democratic responses have been, to give more funding.
Give more funding and make sure you vote in a year.
Yeah,
Do nothing right now.
Give more. We'll give more funding, and then we're going to ask you for some funding. That's their response. But there's a lot.
Feels a little bit like a crazy infomercial, where they're like, "Don't do anything right now, but send us 4 easy payments of blah blah blah." And I'm like, that is not how democracy works. This is not an infomercial. I am not buying a set of knives that can cut through shoe leather, right? Like I am trying to save the country.
Remember we're dating ourselves with the infomercials because I think a lot of people don't even know what the infomercial is.
True. Info is dead now. Just Mershel. It's just Mershel.
I can't believe that just like 2 weeks ago, the world was bracing for a possible U.S. invasion of Greenland. And now that feels like it's like 6 months ago.
Yeah, and it also feels like it might pop back up at any moment. It's like I felt like there was a little bit of hope recently with the Supreme Court decision striking down some of his tariffs, but it doesn't feel like that ended anything either. It just always comes. It's like zombie policies.
Did you see his immediate response was like, "Well, I'm going to do them anyway," essentially.
He didn't give a shit.
And you put this tariff on the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Like global tariff, which is so weird. It's really, I mean, the Supreme Court is, and this is something that we'll definitely talk about. What we're going to do today, listeners, folks out there in the internet world, is who we love and we're super appreciative of, that you're listening to this right now, is we're going to kind of go through and give our version of our LGBTQ State of the Union, which used to happen on the Logo Network. Do you remember that? They used to do
now we're dating ourselves again, too.
Yeah, we are.
Wow, they should bring that back. I mean, not that it would ever be on Logo these days, but like it would be interesting to see some official group actually doing a recap, because one of the stupid things I've been seeing on the internet, which, I try to avoid those terrible places like what used to be Twitter, but you do see people who are like, well, what has he done, that's affecting LGBTQ people? And I'm like, a million things. Like, how deep is your head in the sand? I mean, there are the sort of like global things that are happening, which, we would be remiss in not mentioning because they affect queer people just as much as everybody else. His attacks on NATO. What is this board of peace that he's come up with as like the alternative to the UN, like the commercial alternative to the UN?
That's like got Netanyahu on the board.
For $1 billion, you too can help own and destroy Palestine. Apparently, that's what it costs to get a seat on the board. $1 billion. It's insane, and the gutting of the Department of Education, like just watching universities crumbling around us. Like these things affect all of us: queer people, straight people, cis, trans, US, international. These are decisions he is making that are going to change the global landscape for decades to come, and I think to a large degree, a lot of people just sort of watch them happen. And then, like you said, with Greenland, it's like 2 weeks later, so many other shitty things have happened that you almost forget that a week ago, the worst thing you could possibly imagine happened. And then the next worst thing happened.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people have been asking themselves is like, what's the red line? What is it? How is it going to get too bad? And when a lot of people were having these conversations before Trump came into office, when he was campaigning, people were using the word fascism and talking about how he was going to be a dictator and or even without those descriptors, saying how he was going to be just like reckless with the government and with the country. And so the response to that from a lot of people, including people who were like Democrats was, oh no, he's not. You're just being hyperbolic. You're just being too much. And I don't think anyone, including his staunch defenders, would have been able to describe the way things are right now. That list that you said, and then especially, with regards to LGBTQ people, the attacks on gender affirming care, the attacks on the looming attacks on the hinting at and looming attacks on marriage equality, even things like, we talked about a little bit last week, removal of certain figures, key figures, LGBTQ figures, and also Black figures and, prominent figures from everything from national monuments, the Stonewall National Monument, government buildings and offices and agencies. And also like the very real like removal of mentions of these things from government documents or federal documents and federal terminology. Just like across the board, the list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. And we have more to add to it today.
Yeah. Do you have a red line, Pep? Do you have a red line for yourself?
Uh, yeah, yes, I do. But more important, yes, my personal red line, is, or the things that are the core. I won't call it a red line on this broadcast, but what I'll say is the core issues that are the most pressing for me and the most personal for me are things like gender affirming care and documents that accurately reflect my gender, that accurately reflect who I am and are still valid. Having those are really important to me, and it's been a long, that hasn't changed for me. If you'd asked me that a year or two ago, it would have been the same. And we were able to see that they were attacking gender affirming care, access to healthcare for trans people, for a couple of years now. And it's just gotten more and more. Obviously, it's gone up to the Supreme Court, and we're currently awaiting, some decisions on those things. It's effectively outlawed. Gender affirming care is effectively outlawed for people under the age of 18 or 19, depending on which state you're in this country. There are still states where people of, under the age of 18 or 19 can receive gender affirming care, like New York. But we're starting to see that even in New York with NYU Langone announcing that they're going to stop their program that provides gender affirming care for people under the age of 18, 18 and under, I should say. It is devastating. But we've also heard that the Heritage Foundation is going to next attack gender affirming care for everyone, adults included. And that's going to try to be a federal push that they're going to try to do. So yeah, that's one of mine. And then passports, there's been a lot of talk about trans passports in the news here and there. And there will be, because the decision from the Supreme Court hasn't even come down yet, and it will this summer. So we're waiting to hear like the big news about that. But those are my two pieces. I'm really grateful that I live in New York City though. And so it provides a little bit of buffer to those things. Those are mine. What are yours, if you have any?
The thing I think about with red lines, like I can't imagine leaving the country. I think it would be very hard for me in many ways, and so I don't have that's not a red line that I think about, but I do think about with every institution I am part of, like what is their red line and what is my red line for them? Because like you said with NYU Langone, I think it's a great example. It's like they're like, oh, we don't want to do this, but we're being forced to do it because all of our funding will be cut otherwise. And I want every institution I'm part of and putting effort into to tell me like, okay, what's the point where you're gonna cut off my rights, or what's the point where you're gonna cut off my community? Do you have a red line where you'll stop? Or if you can't define that for me, I used to write a lot for the New York Times, just book reviews, the fluffiest of fluff, And I eventually got to a point where I had to say, I can't do this for you anymore without certain things. Retract that Screams Without Words article about the one that was based on the terrible fake reporting. Stop platforming transphobic, anti-science, anti-morality opinion writers
Get
and
rid of the
letting that
opinion
spread.
section
I
at this point.
it just I had to have red lines for them, and once those were crossed, then I had to step away because for
Did you
me, what
express
I
them?
think about, yeah, I joined the Writers Against the War on Gaza WAWAG boycott, and I had sort of been in conversation with them before the boycott was announced. That we have some differing opinions. We're a big group of people with lots of different ideas about how we move this forward, right? But it was important to me to join their boycott and then individually email my editor there, who I love, great guy, and
Mm.
say to him, like, these are the reasons why I can't write for you anymore. I would love to write for you again in the future. I love being in a world where people get paid to write book reviews, but like I cannot be part of this institution because you have crossed these lines. And that is something, if you're a person at home who has a hard time imagining leaving or what a red line is for yourself, I say ask yourself that about every institution you're in. What's the point at which you need them to say, no, I will not cross this line or I can't participate with you? My university where I was an undergrad, Cornell, has recently rolled over and given into a lot of what Trump wanted, and that's a red line. I cannot participate with them anymore. And I think that's something I want to find with every institution I'm in, to understand what my red line is for them and to understand what their red line is. Because they haven't defined one, they're going to be pushed to give in over and over and over again. And so that's where
I think that
those are my
that's
red lines.
I think that's a really good tactic and strategy, especially like sort of cerebrally. I think we know like anything that earns or charges money, their red line is money. It's America, it's capitalism. And so we know that like I feel like maybe with the exception of Ben and Jerry's is like really the first corporation that I can think of, company corporation that comes to mind, that I can think of that like will put their sort of principles before their earnings, at least optically, publicly,
Mm.
you know? But the rest of these institutions don't seem to do that. And I'm not saying that it's bleak, and that none of them have done that. Of course, there have been institutions that have done the right thing. Um, but I think we one of the things like with NYU Langone, I don't want to ask them what the red line is. I think what we do is we know that you're going to have a red line, and we're going to call you out on the red line, and the red line for you is earning that federal dollars. And then we not only use that. In addition to using that as an opportunity to chastise them for being anti-trans, we should use that as an opportunity to really reevaluate the for-profit medical system. And
Mm.
why is it that this is how they have the ability to cut off health care for human beings based on, you know, based on this aspect, whatever it is in the future or whatever it happens to be now, and really reevaluate and examine this system. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's
and I think we can
capitalism
do
is a
that
red
for
line.
yeah, it's basically capitalism is the red line. And I think we can do that for all of the institutions and say, like, why is it that we're able to cut off really important services, necessary, essential services on a whim like that and how is it that the government, the executive branch is able to just unilaterally use a threat to limit federal funding or cut off federal funding without even like a congressional act or something like that, you
Mhm.
know, like this is a good opportunity for us to like witness what's happening and hopefully be able to kind of, do it we can't just go back to being like all we have to do is just leave everything the way it is and then hopefully like get a Democrat in there who just won't decide to do that. No, it needs to like I don't want them to be able to do that in the future,
Mhm.
you know what I
And
mean?
I feel like that moves us
um
away from this world where we're constantly being told by the Democratic Party, oh, the only thing you can do is vote, right? Give us money and vote. No, we can
yeah,
start holding individual institutions accountable, and saying, like, what are you doing?
absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that was really interesting, should jump into the federal recognition of gender identity when we talk about these how the Trump administration is attacking the LGBTQ community, but really they are hammering really really hard the people that they seem to be the most focused on, and the group that the changes and the threats and the stipulations and the executive orders seem to be most tangible for is the trans community, quite obviously.
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so with how they're attacking like for instance, NYU Langone is they're redefining the like removing the sort of the confines or redefining, um, you know, in this instance, gender identity, but like basically changing the terminology that the medical system can use to
Hmm.
not only bill, like literally bill, but then also, um, I think just sort of like figuratively, like people are using this getting rid of this language or having this language in place, that's more sort of getting rid of woke language, like having
Hmm.
what they would call woke language allows people to communicate in a way that acknowledges all the different groups and all the different things. And if you get rid of that
Yeah.
woke language and then say it's just this, it's this or this, it's black or white, there's no woke
Hmm.
language, then so you make the atmosphere very cold for people and then
Yeah.
remove all that.
Control the terms of the debate so nobody else can
Yeah,
talk outside of the way you talk.
and then limit the federal funding, which is what they're doing and threatening to do. That will scare, an NYU Langone, and NYU has been flirting with this since before the election. In
Hmm.
2024, they were saying at the beginning of 2024, they were saying we think we're going to get rid of the gender affirming care program for or providing gender affirming care for youth under 18. And I actually did a panel, hosted a sort of a forum for the Democratic primary for mayor in New York last year. Obviously, it must have been last year. And I had the opportunity to ask all the candidates at the time what would they do in
Mm.
the instance that not only NYU but other institutions, healthcare institutions would, um, how would they protect gender affirming care for New Yorkers of all
Hmm.
ages? And one of the points that, well, most of them said that they would provide a slush fund that would allow the institutions to temporarily continue to operate in full, while they figured out what would happen federally so that they could supplement the money that we would be losing federally. And then they said, and this is one
Hmm.
thing that Mom Donnie said that I was really happy to hear, is that NYU receives more state and city funding than they do federal funding. And
Hmm.
that and believe you me, after this call, I will be on the phone with Mom Donnie's people.
Hmm.
Um, he said that he would withhold, basically threaten NYU, um, with withholding the larger portion of money that they receive, which is state and city funding, um, which is way more. So if they
Which
want to
is
be, they
actually
could
showing.
choose, yeah, they could choose between the federal or the city and state, which
Yeah,
is,
show is
you
fine.
know,
I mean, use the power that you have, which like you said,
mhm.
it often is the power of money, right? Because right now our system is so broken that is the only thing that anyone responds to. I mean, so many of these issues that we're going to talk about today, they're able to do it because they can push on the money. They can say, we will give you no money, we will give you no support if you don't, cut any kind of global AIDS education that, like you said, uses quote unquote woke language. Or at this point, I mean, they've cut off all federal funding for foreign aid. So that's cutting all UN funding anyways. But it's that money issue, it's that capitalism issue that connects and is the cudgel that they're going to use for all of these things, with trans people as the like first attacked group and the scapegoat group and the wedge issue. It's like it just shows you how failed neoliberalism is as a policy, because neoliberalism depends on all of us having the freedom to get out of these things on our own, but it's systemic. It's not going to be solved on our own. So, right, we're talking about what is happening right now. Federal recognition of gender identity defining gender as sex and sex is binary, and the way that is being used to ban medicine, huge one. What else is on your mind as the queer state of the union, Pep?
Passport and identification, 100%. And that is one of the topics that is related to sex, a binary sex connection, in
Hmm.
terms of like, I mean, pa- identification is used in the modern times to identify your name and your sex. And also like, your immigration, your citizenship status. Um, but the, you know, even on passports, I think that like gender or sex markers weren't even present on passports until like the 80s or something. Which is wild to think. But before that, they weren't. It was just like your name and whatever other information they had. Yeah, the passport, the Supreme Court has heard the passport case, where basically the Department of State, who oversees is over the passports, has ruled that they won't grant or produce any more passports for trans people, passports where the gender marker has been changed in any way. And so they won't reflect accurately who you are. So you could be, for now, you could be like someone who's female or femme presenting, you're a trans woman, long hair, if that's what you're going to do, like
Mhm.
however you're going to look. And then, there's a chance that if you express yourself that way, but it looks differently on your passport, it says male on your passport, then the fear is that that will cause problems for trans people. It will open up
Mhm.
opportunities for other people to discriminate against them, undeservingly.
Yep.
Certainly could cause friction and a discrepancy at like a checkpoint, at an
Mhm.
airport, anywhere where they have to
Voting.
show, yeah, coding, all those things, 100% coding, in medical billing. And so that is a major problem. Um, they're going to start requiring passports for more than just air international travel, is the other thing I was going to say,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
all,
I
that's
was
all it
just
was
thinking,
for before.
yeah, now it's going to be like all kinds of border crossings and all kinds of other things and voting. It's another one of these issues where we can see the trans community being targeted first and most strongly, and then you can see these secondary ripple effects that as we can make it less easy to vote, then it's the Save Act that they're trying to pass that will make it almost impossible for many married women to vote because their birth certificates do not have the same name that they are living and working under, and
And
we're
they're
seeing
not going,
all of
and
these.
that is how it will impact married women, just like the transgender bathroom debate, where should we allow trans people in? No, we shouldn't. We should ban trans people from the bathroom. Everybody be on the lookout for a trans person in the bathroom. And 9 out of 10 times, the people that they apprehend, the people that they harass, the people that they arrest or kick out of the
Mhm.
bathroom are cisgender women. And it will be the same thing. Everyone will be
Yep.
applauding, just like everyone will be applauding the changes that they make to passports, the changes that they make to the voting
Mhm.
policy with regards to identification, enhanced identification, the SAVE Act, and with the nuts and bolts of that, basically the SAVE Act. For those of you don't know, the SAVE Act is a new initiative that's voter ID and like enhanced voter ID laws and policies for obviously for voting, which will require not only to show an ID, but to show multiple forms of identification, to show different forms of identification than we are currently do, and that implement fees and other restrictions uh, if you do or don't show them, or even if sometimes you do. For instance, if you have a changed um, if you change your name, birth certificate, there are some instances that will people will incur a fee, and there are other instances where you need additional paperwork in
Yep.
order to vote. And that provides, um, well, that presents many problems, again, for married women or anyone who's changed their name legally, married women, men, anybody who's changed their name legally, because obviously your name change is going to be different than it is on your birth certificate. And there are not many instances. I have heard of some, but there's not really many instances where anybody can retroactively change their birth certificate with certain
Mhm.
information. Sometimes you can change. There are some states that still allow people to change their gender marker on their birth certificate, but not so much their name. And so if their birth certificate doesn't match which the name that you're giving to vote, then that will not be a
For voting.
valid way to identify yourself. Uh, but then it also impacts not only married women and people who've changed their name, but then also it'll impact like people who are much, much older, primarily African American people. There's a lot of Black people in this. There's still people who are alive during Jim Crow, who were alive during Jim Crow, who were not given birth certificates.
Mhm.
Those people don't have them.
Yeah.
Many
And
people
not
don't
going to be able
have
to
them,
vote.
and they will not be able to vote. There's also people who are like First Nations people who are, indigenous, and they were not given the same sort of like forms of identification, and they're not really uh,
Yeah. Tribal
enfranchised the
documents
same
will not
way.
count
Yeah,
under
they
these new
won't
acts.
count.
You brought
Yeah.
this up a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and I just want to resurface it because we were talking about sports policies and the transphobic wedge and how people are applauding all of these transphobic policies specifically aimed against trans women in sports and not thinking about broader implementation. And what does it mean that we will live in a world where every single girl who is 6 years old who wants to play sports is now what, going to get her genitals and chromosomes checked, right? People's brains are so rotted with transphobia that they are so willing to applaud things that if they thought about them for even 2 seconds, they would see the ways in which this would damage them, people they cared about, the world in general. But they're so fixated on hating and policing trans people. And that, I think, is something that the right uses really powerfully. They know how to take a wedge issue and just use that hate. And I think that point that you made a few weeks ago regarding sports applies to all of the things we are talking about.
100%. Yeah, and that's how they're going to do it. Um, and so that's a big issue. Another thing that we again, think you just brought up school sports. School sports is a big issue. I was actually, and we talked about this a while ago. I was sitting in the Supreme Court during arguments about trans participation in sports, school sports, college level sports, and club sports, all different types. And we're still waiting for the decision on that. Most of the things that have gone to the Supreme Court, the decisions will likely come down during the summer, which is typical. So we're waiting on the decision for that. It's not looking so good. The good news, the silver-ish lining is that decision looks like it could be devastating, but it's looking like it could be a narrow decision, which means it won't be the most sweeping and devastating decision that they could potentially make. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
silver lining, but it will limit participation for trans folks in sports,
Yeah.
and that is, you know, e- the, again, the silver lining to that is that it's not necessarily going to be super general or sweeping for everyone. Uh, but we saw that there was a silver lining when they made the decisions with how to support several states' decision to block young youth, people under 18, from receiving gender-affirming care in their state. Supreme Court upheld that, and now we're seeing that the Heritage Foundation again is moving to
Mm-hmm.
just move it over to adults, and so that's clearly what they're going to do with the sports conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but they don't even necessarily have to, because like the Olympic Committee has gone back on their policy, the
Yep.
NCAA has gone back on their policy, and that's the thing that's really upsetting to me, to see that these institutions that, like you said, are going back on their previously held policy that has been supportive of being in service to trans people. And the one that's the latest one that was really upsetting to me is to see that the American Association of Plastic Surgeons, which I never even heard of, has come
Right.
out against trans people and saying we're not going to provide gender affirming care, or we don't recommend. They're not going to say they're not going to.
Yeah.
They don't recommend people plastic surgeons provide gender affirming care, and that they think that it's
Are they
harmful.
going to
And then
stop providing gender affirming care for cis women and cis men who want?
no, they
Because all
won't.
plastic surgery is gender affirming care. It's just. Mm.
Yeah. But what's more troubling and upsetting is the American Medical Association, which is the major medical association that had um, been in favor of and supportive of gender affirming care, and that it's not harmful, that it is helpful, and holding that position has just basically endorsed the decision of the American Association of Plastic Surgeons. And so that is a huge blow to that's terrible.
Yeah.
And it feels, it's like what changed? That's my
Hmm.
question. What changed? But yeah, so that's
And
upsetting.
I mean, I think right along with all of this is the ways in which they are going after, like you said, the language which we use to discuss this, right? Because if they get their way, there's going to be, no more census data collection on LGBTQ populations and
Hmm.
school curriculums that educate about this. And they're going to remove these things from the actual curriculums of doctors and psychotherapists as they're pushing, to bring back conversion therapy, which will probably happen by the end of this Supreme Court round in June. All of these ways in which they control the language make it even harder for any of us to talk about these things, to negotiate them within these institutions. It's all connected. Each one of these issues, if you're out there listening and you're one of those people who thinks, oh, this issue doesn't affect me, it's a tiny issue. The, sports playing trans population, well, it's sad, but it's a tiny thing. It all comes together. They are building a state that I don't think any of us want to be part of. And they're doing it very consciously with these movements that some people are willing to ignore. It goes back to our red line conversation, right? If you don't think all of these are red lines, then eventually they are going to get you caught up and part of this movement to cut all of us off. And it is appalling. It's like that frog in a pot metaphor, right? Like we are watching the water boil.
Yeah, and the thing that's really, you know, that makes me think of is that, like, a lot of us don't know. We don't know our civics. We don't know how the government really is supposed to run. I think a lot of us know like little, one-liners and things like that. But they're able to do this because not many people, people who live in the U.S. Um, are that knowledgeable, like to the core about what our rights are, and in order for the rights, this to be like a free country that has rights for us, for multitudes and multitudes of people, for anyone to be able to like live their life and not have to worry about these things, because these rights apply as they should to all of us. And
Inalienable.
in order for them to attack one group of people, they have to turn off the rights. They have to dismantle the rights. They have to cancel the rights.
Hmm.
Like it's like if you're in a room and it's like and it smells so good and we can breathe and we got all this fresh air in this room, and then somebody comes in and is like, we're going to suffocate that person. In order to suffocate that person, they have to turn off the oxygen for all of us, not just that one person. And that is what they're doing. And that's what people aren't seeing, is that this loss of rights and these rolling back, and the LGBTQ community is too out of control and they're shoving it down our throats. So we have to take it away and let's get it out of here. And I don't care what you do in your own bedroom, but I don't want to see you anywhere. I don't want to see you in school. I don't want to see you at work. I don't want to see you at the voting. I don't want to see you in the
Hmm.
hospital. I don't want to see you getting on. I don't want my money going to that. Your money ain't going to that, bitch. My money's going to your shit too. And so like
Hmm.
all of that is what is you are signing your own rights away. Wake up.
Hmm. No, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think about all the cuts to like healthcare around the world, everything that RFK is
Uh-huh.
doing. It's like, oh, you might sit here and think, oh, I don't care who dies of AIDS around the world. It's not going to affect me. Well, that's not how viruses work, actually. And that's not how destabilizing entire countries by letting their populations die works. It all comes back home. There is no place where the chickens will not roost.
It's true. And it's happening. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting to, you know, you're right. Like these types of things know no borders, right? And
Yeah.
it's already starting to come home to roost. But certainly with AIDS and HIV, um, I think I think people who live in the U.S. don't have, or U.S. citizens even, don't have much to say and much in their minds about imperialism, um, and destabilization of other countries, lands,
Mhm.
things like that. I don't think that we have that much of in our minds about that. I'm not saying individually, but I think
Right.
collectively, like, we are sold this in our history books. Like, I don't know what we think Puerto Rico is.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because as long as I've been alive, I have known, or like as long as I can remember, I've known of a place called Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
I'm speaking like sort of like the royal we. Obviously, I know. Um, but like I've known of a place called Puerto Rico, but I actually don't remember when I learned about Puerto Rico's existence, if I did at all,
Mm.
in the history books and what it said about that. Do
Yeah,
you?
and why it's part of the U.S. and no, we didn't. That was, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it happened,
It
but if it
just
did, it
it's
was so
there. It's
fast.
just it's not one of the 50 states, but it's part
Hmm.
of a territory, and it just happens to be. We That's not in there. How we like over and over again use the CIA to destabilize their government, murder their political
Hmm.
leaders, and like in the 50s, like right before some of us were born,
We never talk
and
about the
like
empire, American empire in school, but if we have territories around the world that we control and have no say in our government, that would make us an empire. It's, yeah,
I don't
these
even
things that
think
we
we
did not
talk about
learn.
the British Empire. I think the only like connection to the British Empire that that I think we have is just America, and that United States of America didn't want, or like the people that were here on this, that came over to this land, uh the colonizers and settlers didn't want to be under British control, taxation without representation, and they wanted to take the land for themselves. I think that's the only connection to British imperialism that I remember us talking about.
For me, growing up Irish with a family that really hated the British Empire, it's hard for me to remember when I did not learn about the empire. Like that's just something. My mother's first words to me on 9/11 were, "This is the British's fault." And so for me, it's a little hard to separate when I learned about that from school versus not in school. And
Okay.
I'd be curious, listening to the listeners at home, drop us a line. Let us know, what do you know about these things? When did you learn it? And what's on your mind for the queer state of the union? What are the issues you're tracking? What are your red lines? What's happening in your community? Because we're talking very big picture here, but it's affecting each of us at home every day. And we want to hear from you. What's happening in your community? What's on top of your mind? Drop us a comment, a review, write to us at questions@queer101podcast.com. However you want to get in touch with us, we want to hear from you.
We certainly do. Listen, y'all, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a lot of great stuff that's going on. There are a lot of wonderful people resisting what we're experiencing here in the United States. And there is always a way for you to fight back. And it always starts the same way, which is connection, communal connection, and doing whatever you would do if we lost access to the electricity, the internet, you know, the systems of communication that we currently rely on. That's the first thing. And so, there are ways that you can like reconnect and become even to get what you need. If they shut off the medication, you can figure out a way to get what you need from your neighbor. If you and your neighbor are connected, you'll be able to have access to food. You'll be able to have access to shelter. You'll be able to have access to the warmth and the things that you need immediately. And that is, I know that's kind of like very bare bones, but sometimes we
That's
got to
where
go
it
back to
starts.
basics. Yeah, we
Yeah,
got to go back to
absolutely.
basics. Listen, y'all, thank you so much for listening here on a Tuesday. I hope this State of the Union was even better than the State of the Union delivered by the administration. But we'll talk about that on our next episode, which comes out next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this. It doesn't cost you a single thing, but it really does help us out in the algorithm. And I just watched a study, by the way, that shows that in the numbers that all the major platforms, social media, YouTube, all these things are actually suppressing sort of progressive or left-wing thought and videos and content, and boosting about 2 to 1 right-wing conservative talking points and content. And so we really do depend on our audience to help us boost this. So after you watch this, please share it. Please like it. Please connect with it, engage with it, leave a comment, as you said, because that really does help us out. And it increases the likelihood that you'll see our next video, which comes out next
Mhm.
Tuesday. For now, thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by us, Peppermint and Hugh, produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig, with original music composed by Nell Balaban.
If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps others discover the show.
You can stay connected and join the conversation by following us at Peppermint 24/7 or write to us at questions@queer101podcast.com.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our history is your history. Stay proud, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on Queer 101.